What if everything you've been taught about death was wrong? You've seen it on television, you've heard it in hospitals, you've felt it in the silence of a funeral room. The end of a life, the end of presence, the end of connection. And yet, deep within you, there's always been something that doesn't quite align with that story. Something in your spirit whispers, this isn't the end. This isn't goodbye. Because it's not. Death, real death, is not the closing of a door. It's not a vanishing into nothingness. It's not a cruel silence that steals someone you love. What if instead it's the very moment you awaken from a long sacred dream? You see, your final breath here is your soul's first breath there. The truth is, the soul doesn't recognize death the way the body does. Your body may grow tired, it may break down, wear out, or cease to function. But your soul, that eternal spark of you, is never touched by death. It doesn't age, it doesn't weaken, it doesn't dissolve into darkness. It remembers. In fact, in those last moments, when your chest rises and falls more slowly, when the world seems to quiet around you, something sacred is happening. Something most people can't see with their eyes, but you can feel it if you're still enough. There's a soft pulling, like being gently carried away by a tide of light. There's a presence in the room that no machines can monitor, but your heart knows it's there. It's not fear, it's not panic, it's a kind of deep remembering. Because at the end of life, your soul begins to stir. It begins to wake up. You were never meant to dread this moment. You were never meant to live your entire life afraid of how it would end. That fear, that's not divine. That's conditioning. That's generations of misunderstanding passed down through stories meant to protect us, but that somehow forgot the truth. They forgot to tell you that death isn't an ending, it's a homecoming. When your final moment comes, whether you're surrounded by loved ones or lying quietly alone in a hospital room, you're not really alone at all. There are beings you once knew, some you may have forgotten, gathering around you. Not in some dramatic, ghostly way, but in peace, in light, in love. They come to welcome you. You don't have to earn this. You don't have to be perfect, enlightened, or religious to experience this sacred welcome. Your soul doesn't care how many mistakes you made. It knows who you really are. And it's always been ready to guide you gently through the veil. Imagine this, you're lying still. The weight of the physical body is lifting. The breath that once rose and fell in rhythm is slowing, like the ocean before a still morning. You might not even feel it happening at first. There's no pain, there's no sudden stop. It's more like slipping from one dream into another. But this time, you're waking up. There's a warmth that surrounds you, not heat, but light. It begins at your feet and moves upward, as if the space around you is softly dissolving into something familiar, something safe. Your vision begins to shift. The ceiling of the room fades into brightness. The sounds around you soften. It's as if your soul is slowly detaching from the weight it's carried for so long. And then you see them. It might be your mother, gone years before you, or a sibling, or someone you never got to meet in this lifetime but somehow recognize. Their eyes shimmer with a kind of knowing. They don't speak at first. They don't need to, because in that space between here and there, words aren't required. Love speaks louder. You may feel confused for a moment. Is this real? Am I dreaming? But the answer will arrive, not as a voice, but as truth. You remember. You remember that you've been here before. That death is not a stranger. It's not the end of your story, it's a continuation. It's the moment the curtain lifts and you realize the play was only a rehearsal for something far greater. And here's something even more beautiful. This transition doesn't only happen when the heart stops. It begins before that. Sometimes weeks before the body lets go. The soul begins to move, to adjust, to drift. That's why you hear the stories. The grandmother who spoke of seeing her late husband sitting in the corner chair. The father who whispered a name you didn't recognize only to learn it was a childhood friend long gone. The person in hospice who stared into the corner of the room and smiled, like they were watching someone walk toward them. That's not confusion. That's not the medication. That's the veil beginning to thin. Their souls are preparing. The bridge is already being built, and though you might not be able to see it, they're already halfway across. So when you think about death, don't picture a cold, dark void. Don't imagine silence and nothingness. Instead, imagine a doorway. A doorway that's always been open, one you've walked through many times before without remembering. And when you do walk through it again, you'll remember everything. You'll remember that you were never just this body. You were never just your thoughts, your pain, your achievements, or your regrets. You were something far beyond all of it, and in that remembering all fear falls away. Because you'll see that what you called death was really just the beginning of your next breath, your next chapter, your next unfolding. So if you've ever feared the end, take this in. There is no end, only transformation, only return, only love, waiting patiently for you to remember that it never left, that it's always been walking beside you, that the final breath is not a goodbye, it's the beginning of your soul's awakening. And you, dear soul, have never been more alive. There's a moment, soft, unspoken, and almost invisible to the outside world, where everything changes. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it doesn't arrive with fanfare or finality, but in that instant, when your heart takes its last beat and your body begins to let go, something extraordinary happens. Your soul lifts, not as a jolt or an explosion, but as a gentle unraveling, like the loosening of tightly woven threads that no longer need to bind, like mist rising from a quiet lake just before dawn. It's subtle, so subtle that most people miss it, even when they're sitting right beside someone they love, holding their hand as they cross over. But you don't miss it, because you feel it, not with your mind, not even with your senses, but with something deeper, a knowing, a sacred recognition that something has just returned home. For your entire life, your soul has lived in the sacred vessel of your body. It's been your partner in every breath, every experience, every triumph and trauma. It's not separate from you. It is you. The purest, most unfiltered version. The part that doesn't age. The part that doesn't fear. The part that remembers what you've forgotten. And when the time comes, when the body can no longer carry what it once did, your soul doesn't resist. It doesn't cling. It's not afraid. It simply rises. It begins with a soft detachment, a release from the weight you've carried, not just physical weight, but emotional, energetic, spiritual, all the grief, the worry, the confusion, the need to prove, the pressure to be, the pain of holding on. It slips away. Not because you're losing something, but because you're remembering what it means to be free. You weren't captured yourself. They arrested you, and that you. The soul doesn't just pop out of the body like a ghost in a movie. It's far more sacred than that. It moves with reverence. It knows this body. It has loved it, lived in it, grown through it. It doesn't abandon it. It blesses it. It says thank you. You may not hear those words, but they're felt. Thank you for carrying me. Thank you for experiencing this life with me. Thank you for allowing me to know sorrow, joy, and love in ways only a body can feel. And then it lifts. It's like being pulled upward through a warm current of light, not upward in space, but upward in vibration. Your soul rises not to a physical height, but to a higher dimension of awareness, one that has always surrounded you, but now you're fully part of it again. You may still feel a tether for a moment, a thin line between you and the body that was your home. This tether isn't fear, it's love. It's the soul's final gesture of gratitude, a final acknowledgement before stepping beyond. Some describe it as floating, others say it's like waking up from a long, vivid dream and realizing, oh, this is who I truly am. But no matter how it feels, one truth always remains. There is no fear in that moment. None. The soul doesn't panic when the body stops. It doesn't scream or mourn. It remembers. It remembers the agreements. It remembers the timelessness. It remembers that it was never just the body, and that death is not destruction, death is returning. From the outside, someone might look at a lifeless body and say, they're gone. But you, your soul, knows better. You're not gone. You've just changed form. You've stepped out of the costume and realized you were the actor all along. You haven't disappeared. You've expanded. There's a stillness right after the soul lifts. A pause, as if the entire universe is holding its breath, honoring this sacred crossing. Some call it the holy hush. It's the space between what was and what is. And in that stillness, something else happens. You begin to see. You see your body, maybe from above, maybe from beside it, but instead of fear or attachment, what you feel is peace. You understand it now. That body was never you. It was your vehicle, your temple, your tool, but you were always something more. And in this lifted state, you begin to notice other presences around you. Beings of light, familiar souls, loved ones who had crossed long before you. They've been waiting, not just watching from a distance, but actively holding space for you to arrive. Their energy is unmistakable. It's love magnified. There's no need for words. Your souls speak in feelings, in memory, in knowing. You might feel the presence of someone you never met in this lifetime, a grandparent who passed before you were born, a soul from a life lived long ago, or a guide who has walked with you since your first breath, but remained unseen. They greet you as one of their own. There's no judgment, no interrogation, no weighing of sins or good deeds. That's a human invention. What exists here is truth, pure, radiant truth. And in the presence of that truth, you see yourself clearly and love yourself completely. You might expect some grand moment of reckoning, but what you find instead is gentleness, acceptance, welcome, because from the perspective of the soul, there is no such thing as failure. There is only learning. There is only love. This is the part no one talks about, the part the world forgets in its fear of endings. That moment when your soul lifts is the moment you are most held, not by hands, but by the very fabric of creation itself. And even if no one else in the room sees it, even if the monitors have gone flat and the tears begin to fall, you know. You know you've just stepped into something vast and beautiful. You know you're not alone. You know that love didn't end, it followed you here. This is the truth. The soul never dies. It only returns to where it came from, with more experience, more compassion, more light. And in that return, you are not diminished. You are expanded, enlightened, restored. So when the moment comes, and it will come for all of us, may you know this. There is nothing to fear, because in that quiet moment when the body rests, the soul rises, and it rises into love. There is something you should know, something sacred, something unspoken, something that most people will never tell you until it's too late. You are never alone when you die, even if the room is empty, even if the machines are quiet, even if the last physical touch has faded and the air feels still. You are not, and have never been, alone in that space, because there is a presence in the room that you cannot see, but you can feel. And when the veil thins, it becomes undeniable. This presence doesn't arrive after you pass. It doesn't show up as an afterthought or float in once the final breath has left your body. It comes before, sometimes hours before, sometimes days, and in many cases, weeks. It comes gradually, tenderly, like mist forming over water. Loved ones, spirit guides, beings of light. They come with purpose, not just to greet, but to prepare. You may not see them with your human eyes, but your soul recognizes them instantly. There's a familiarity in the air, a soft shift, a sudden sense of warmth even when the room is cold, a quiet peace that moves through your chest even when the body is struggling. It's them. They've arrived. You might feel a subtle brushing near your skin, like someone adjusting your blanket, but no one is there. You might hear whispers as you drift off to sleep, but the nurses say it's quiet. You might catch a glimpse in your peripheral vision, just a flicker, and then it's gone. Not imagined, not hallucinated, real. Because the spirit world has begun to open. You see, in those final days and hours, a doorway begins to unlock. Not suddenly, but slowly, like someone drawing back a curtain, inch by inch, allowing light to pour in just a little more each time. This is what most people miss. They think death happens in a moment, 1 second here, the next, gone. But the truth is, the transition starts long before the last breath. And the room, the one you're lying in, becomes something else entirely. It becomes sacred ground. Not because of what's happening physically, but because of what's gathering around you. It's not just a hospital bed or a bedroom anymore. It's a portal, a thin place, a bridge between the visible and the invisible. You may find yourself looking toward the corner of the room, eyes wide, smiling for no reason. You may speak a name no one else recognizes. You might even start reaching out with your hands, as if someone is standing just beyond the foot of the bed. Someone is. It could be your grandmother, the one who held you through childhood storms. It could be your father, whose presence you haven't felt in years. It could be a friend, a sibling, a child, or a soul you loved before this life even began. And they're not here to scare you. They're not haunting. They're helping, guiding, surrounding. They've come to walk you home. And it's not just loved ones. There are others. Beings who have known you not just in this lifetime, but across many. Angels who've stood beside you since birth, even if you never knew their names. Guides who whispered to you through intuition, gut feelings, dreams. Always nudging you closer to your truth. They've gathered now. Not to carry you away, but to remind you who you are. Because in those final moments as the body weakens, the soul becomes more present, more aware. The veil becomes thin not only for them to enter, but for you to see. That's why the dying often speak to people no one else can see. That's why they smile into empty spaces. That's why they say things like, "She's here," or "They're waiting." That's why the air in the room begins to feel different. Softer, heavier, quieter, more alive. Not because the mind is slipping, but because the spirit is awakening. And maybe you've seen it. Maybe you've sat by someone's bedside and watched their eyes dart across the room, like they were watching something just beyond the wall. Maybe you heard them whisper to someone long gone, not in fear, but in familiarity. Maybe they started talking about a childhood friend, a long-lost mother, or someone who passed before you were born. That wasn't confusion, that was communion. The presence you can't see is real. And in the moments before death it surrounds us like a circle of light. Not to take away, but to give. To offer comfort, reassurance, a sense of peace that no medicine or machine can provide. There's a reason so many describe the atmosphere around death as holy. It's not because of grief. It's not because of loss. It's because of what's there. A sacred assembly, a reunion, a homecoming celebration in slow motion. And what's even more beautiful is that they come no matter what. Even if you've been angry with them, even if you never got to say goodbye, even if your life was full of mistakes and regrets, they come because love isn't conditional in the spiritual realm. It doesn't need explanations. It doesn't keep score. The bonds formed by the soul are eternal. And when you're nearing the crossing, that love becomes your compass. Sometimes their presence is subtle, sometimes it's overwhelming, but it's always there. Always. You are never left to die alone. even if the nurses step out, even if the family has gone home, even if the only sound is the soft beeping of a monitor or the breath of the wind outside the window, you are not alone. They hold your energy, they surround your bed, they whisper into the silence. Not with words, but with feeling, with presence, with knowing. And when the time comes, they don't pull you, they invite you. They extend their hands, not to force, but to guide. You'll feel it not as pressure, but as peace, not as fear, but as freedom. Because in the presence of divine love, you don't need to be convinced. You simply remember. Remember that you are loved, that you are eternal, that this is not a goodbye, but a return, and that the ones who walked this world before you have come back for you now, not to end your story, but to begin the next chapter, side by side, hand in hand, soul to soul. There's something mysterious that starts to happen weeks, sometimes even months, before someone passes. You might not notice it at first. It's not loud or obvious. It doesn't announce itself with flashing lights or bold signs. But if you're paying attention, if your heart is open, you'll feel it. It begins with a subtle shift, a change in presence, in awareness, in the way someone speaks, or how their eyes seem to look through the walls, not at them. Their words soften, their stories change, and sometimes they start having conversations with people who aren't there, at least not in the physical sense. But here's the secret: they are there. Because long before the body lets go, the soul begins preparing for departure. And with that preparation comes something miraculous. The veil begins to thin. You've heard about this veil. Maybe in passing, maybe in spiritual circles, maybe as a metaphor. But it's more than just poetic language, it's real. It's the invisible layer between this world and the next. A barrier of sorts that keeps our earthly awareness from fully touching the spirit realm. But as the end of life nears, something starts to dissolve. Not all at once, but gradually, like fog lifting off a lake in the early morning light. And when the veil thins, what's behind it becomes more visible. This is why so many people, especially the elderly or those with terminal illness, begin to act differently as their time draws closer. It's not just aging, it's not just medication, it's not just mental confusion. Sometimes it's something far deeper. Their awareness is no longer fixed in this world alone. It's stretching across dimensions, reaching both forward and back, bridging two realms at once. You might walk into the room and find your loved one smiling at someone who isn't there, or hear them say something like, "Mum just came to visit," or "He told me he's waiting for me by the tree." Maybe they speak a name you've never heard before, someone from their childhood long gone, or a sibling you didn't know existed. And maybe they even describe things they've never seen in this lifetime, but speak of as if they remember it well. To you it might sound strange, disconnected, even surreal, but to them it feels completely natural, because the closer they move toward the threshold of transition, the more they are able to see what lies beyond it. This clarity isn't random, it's sacred. It's part of a natural process, one built into the very fabric of life and death. Just as the body begins to slow down, the spirit begins to wake up. And in that awakening, memories long buried begin to surface, visions that don't belong to this world begin to take shape, and beings from the other side begin to draw near. Not just to observe, but to reconnect, to prepare, to welcome. This is why so many people experience moments of sudden lucidity near death. Sometimes a person who hasn't spoken in days will suddenly sit up, wide-eyed and smiling. They'll say something beautiful, something clear. Sometimes it's a message. "I'm going soon," or "They're here for me." Sometimes it's a question. "Do you see her?" Or "Is the door open yet?" Other times it's a simple name, softly spoken but full of emotion, like a reunion has already begun just out of view. These moments are sacred. Not delusions, not signs of confusion, but sacred glimpses. Because when the veil begins to thin, the soul starts to remember everything it was before this life and everything it's returning to. You may notice that the person becomes more peaceful, less attached to the material, less worried about the day-to-day. Their eyes begin to gaze at things you can't see, sometimes with wonder, sometimes with deep recognition. They may speak less or fall into long silences, but it's not emptiness, it's presence, it's focus. They are listening to voices no one else can hear, watching scenes unfold in realms you've yet to remember. And those visitors, the ones they see, aren't strangers. They are familiar. Their presence brings calm, not fear. The dying don't look alarmed when they speak to their guides or their ancestors. They look comforted, reassured. Sometimes they even laugh, or weep with joy, or whisper, "I missed you," with a trembling voice that tells you this moment is more real than anything they've said in weeks. These are the signs. This is the beginning of the journey home. It's important that you don't dismiss these moments. Don't brush them off as confusion. Don't minimize them out of discomfort. Because when the veil begins to lift, your loved one is seeing something true, perhaps more true than anything they've ever seen with physical eyes. You might wonder, why can't I see it too? And the answer isn't that you're not spiritual or not intuitive, it's simply that your awareness is still grounded in this world. Your time has not yet come to glimpse what they are now touching. But you can feel it if you open yourself to it. You can sense the shift in energy, the softness in the room, the invisible crowd gathering in the corners. You can feel the sacred thinning of this reality and the quiet welcome of the next. Sometimes, the thinning veil allows for extraordinary things to happen. A dying parent might speak to a child they lost long ago and say, "He's holding my hand again." A terminal patient might describe a landscape they've never visited but can now see in vivid detail. There's a bridge made of light, or there's a river with stars in it. And others simply smile, as if they're listening to music only they can hear, ancient and familiar. It doesn't always look profound to outsiders, but to the soul inside that body, it's everything. It's reunion, it's remembrance, it's return. And as the veil lifts more and more, the soul begins to let go, not out of despair but with grace. It no longer clings to what it once feared losing, because it now remembers that nothing is truly lost. Not love, not time, not connection. Everything is simply changing form. So when you find yourself with someone who is nearing the end, know this. What you're witnessing is not just a person dying. You are watching a soul begin to rise, begin to remember, begin to cross into the truth of who they've always been. You are witnessing the veil lift, and in that space between breaths, between worlds, between here and there, something sacred is happening. They are not slipping away, they are going home. You've probably heard it, or maybe you've even witnessed it firsthand. A loved one, lying in a bed near the end of their life, suddenly begins to speak names you've never heard before. Their voice, once weak and strained, carries a kind of strange conviction. They smile at corners of the room. They look up, eyes wide as if someone just walked in. Someone you can't see. They start talking to people who've long since passed away, or mention places they've never visited in this life. Maybe it's a sister who died before they were born, or a man named Samuel who no one in the family has ever heard of. And you sit there, wondering quietly if they're just confused, if it's the medication, if their mind is simply drifting. But what if it's not confusion at all? What if these visitations are not hallucinations, but revelations? You see, something incredible happens as the soul begins to prepare for its departure. It doesn't wait for the final breath to begin the process. It starts earlier. Often days or weeks before death, the soul, already feeling the call to return, begins to receive visitors. Not visitors in the ordinary sense, but spiritual companions, escorts, guides, loved ones long gone, returning not to haunt but to help. They come to prepare the way. These moments aren't random. They're not imagined. They're part of a divine design. One so ancient, so deeply embedded into the architecture of the soul's journey that we've forgotten how natural it is. We've dismissed it. We've given it labels like delirium or terminal agitation, and written it off as the brain's final misfires. But what we call confusion, the soul might call clarity. When the physical body starts to fade, the soul's awareness begins to heighten. Like a radio tuning away from one frequency and toward another, the consciousness begins to pick up signals from beyond this dimension. And in that tuning, visitations begin. They are often subtle at first, a presence felt more than seen, a warmth in the room, a voice heard just before falling asleep. But then it grows stronger, more vivid. The lines between this world and the next blur, and the soul begins to navigate both at once. This is why people nearing death often speak with people you've never met or recall names that have been long forgotten. It might be a childhood friend they haven't spoken of in 60 years. It might be their mother, who passed when they were just a child. Or it might be someone no one in the family even knows. But the moment they say the name, their face lights up with recognition, with joy, with the unmistakable feeling of reunion. You may feel tempted to correct them, to say, "No, Mum, Uncle John's been gone for 20 years. But don't. Because in that moment, your mother isn't confused. She's connected. She's seeing what you can't see yet. She's being shown the path ahead, not through instructions or logic, but through presence. These visitors aren't just stopping by to say hello. They are arriving with purpose. They are here to escort the soul home. In spiritual traditions across the world, from Tibetan Buddhism to ancient Egyptian beliefs, from indigenous teachings to mystical Christianity, this phenomenon has always been known. Dying is not a solo journey, it's a sacred crossing. And just as no baby is born without a midwife or a parent there to receive them, no soul departs without someone to guide them back. These spirit guides and loved ones are your soul's midwives. They are the bridge between here and there. Some are ancestors, people from your family line who have watched over you your entire life even if you never knew their names. Some are old friends from this lifetime or lifetimes past, souls who've walked beside you before and have returned to accompany you again. Others are not human at all, but spiritual guides, luminous beings of light whose only role is to support and protect you during this most vulnerable and beautiful transition. When these visitations begin, something shifts. The person nearing death may start talking more about going home, even if they haven't left the room in weeks. They might ask you to make room, to move a chair aside, because someone's sitting there. They might start describing vivid landscapes or recall places they've never seen in this life but somehow remember with complete clarity. They may speak less and listen more, as if attending a conversation happening just outside of your hearing. And what you'll notice, if you really pay attention, is that there's usually no fear. In fact, many people nearing death begin to relax when these visitations begin. Even those who feared death their entire lives often soften, sometimes smiling without explanation, or falling into a deep calm they hadn't felt in years. That's not coincidence. That's the soul remembering that it is loved, not just by the people gathered around the bed, but by those who've come to receive it from beyond. You might even feel the energy shift in the room yourself. The air feels heavier, but not in a suffocating way, more sacred, more full, as if something important is happening, something holy. You can't see them, but you know you're not the only one in the room anymore. There's a sense of reverence, like being in a cathedral, even in a quiet bedroom. Children are especially open to this. If you've ever seen a child near the end of life, you'll notice they often smile, giggle, or point to things that others can't see. That's because their spiritual senses haven't been trained to ignore the unseen. They know who's come, they recognize their guides without question. And when they say, "Grandma is here," even if Grandma passed away before they were born, believe them. They're not making it up. They're being welcomed. The soul never travels alone. No matter the circumstances of death, whether sudden or slow, surrounded by family or seemingly alone in a quiet room, The spirit is always accompanied. These visitations ensure that. They aren't figments of imagination. They are reminders that you are seen, that you are expected, that your journey is known, and you are being met at the threshold. And what's perhaps most comforting of all is this. These guides don't just show up at the end. They've been with you all along. They walked beside you through your darkest nights and your brightest days. They whispered into your intuition. They nudged you toward people, choices, experiences that shaped your life. And now, as you approach your return, they come out from behind the veil, not as strangers, but as family. So when the time comes, when your loved one starts mentioning names you've never heard or places they've never been, don't panic. Don't try to pull them back into this world. Just listen. Just hold space. Just witness. Because you're being given a glimpse into the sacred. You're watching the soul begin to walk its final path, not into nothingness, but into a reunion that was planned long before this lifetime began. The ones coming to greet them, they're not a hallucination. They're home. There's a quiet transformation that begins long before the body takes its final breath. It doesn't begin in the hospital bed. It doesn't start the moment someone becomes physically weak. It happens before all that. Gently, almost imperceptibly. A soft unraveling, a soul stirring, a subtle preparation begins, not just of the body, but of the energy, of the consciousness, of the unseen threads connecting this life to the next. If you've ever sat beside someone in the final month of life, you've probably sensed it, even if you didn't know what it was. Maybe you noticed their gaze becoming more distant. Maybe you heard them say things that felt strange, even mystical. Maybe they pulled away from the routine conversations, the small talk, and instead spoke in fragments that carried weight, even if you couldn't fully understand them. That's not just fatigue, that's not just decline, that's the soul beginning its transition. You see, the soul doesn't wait for death to show up. It's far more intelligent, far more ancient, and far more graceful than we've been taught to believe. The process of letting go, of returning, begins slowly. It's a process that unfolds over time, often over the course of weeks, sometimes even longer, and it always begins with energy. The first signs aren't always visible, they're felt. Maybe they seem quieter, like their presence has started to soften. They're still here, still talking, still smiling, but there's a difference in the air around them. Their energy feels lighter, more spacious, almost as if part of them is already drifting somewhere else. Not lost, just not fully anchored here anymore. Their soul knows what's coming, even if the mind hasn't caught up, and in that knowing it begins to prepare, not through fear or resistance, but through surrender. You might notice they begin to sleep more, but the sleep feels different. It's not just exhaustion, it's depth, it's inwardness. They drift off not to escape, but to explore. Because in those quiet hours, their soul begins reaching across the veil, reconnecting with the world they came from, the world they will soon return to, and in that reaching, something beautiful happens. They begin to remember. Memories long buried begin to resurface, dreams become more vivid. Sometimes they speak of people they haven't thought of in years. Sometimes they begin saying things like, "I think I'm going soon," or "They told me I don't have much time left." These words are rarely said in fear. They're said with a kind of quiet acceptance, a tone that suggests that deep inside they know. Because they do. The month before death often brings a strange clarity, not always in a linear or rational way, but in a soul-deep, intuitive knowing. You might watch as someone who struggled with memory suddenly becomes lucid, just for a moment, just long enough to say something that feels important, and then, just as quickly, they fade back into the fog. These flashes are not accidents. They are parting gifts, moments when the soul pushes through to say what needs to be said. And in between those moments, there's often stillness, silence, a kind of retreat from the noise of the world. This is not depression, it's not giving up, it's preparation. They are turning inward, gathering the final pieces of their earthly story, reflecting not with words, but with feeling. They may not speak much about it, they may not say, "I'm ready," but you'll feel it in their presence, in their stillness, in the way they begin to let go. Not just of possessions or plans, but of roles, of identities, of the masks we all wear in this human journey. They begin to let go of being someone's parent, someone's child, someone's spouse, someone's success story, and instead they begin to remember who they were before all those labels, who they've always been beneath the surface, their essence, their soul. During this time, conversations often shift. You may notice that the talk of the future starts to fade. Plans for next year, next month, even next week might feel irrelevant, not because they don't care, but because they're living in a different rhythm now. Time itself begins to feel less linear to them. They may drift in and out of memory, speak about things as if they're happening now, even if they happened decades ago. It can be disorienting if you don't understand what's happening. But if you look closely, you'll see the beauty in it. The soul is loosening its grip on time. It's beginning to live in that eternal present that exists beyond calendars and clocks. It's not confusion, it's transcendence. And then there's the emotional shift. Many people in the month before they leave begin to seek reconciliation. They ask for forgiveness. They express love more freely. They may become more affectionate, more open, more tender. Sometimes they say, "I love you," more often. Sometimes they apologize for things no one even remembers. Sometimes they cry unexpectedly, not out of sadness, but because something deep within is stirring. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. Because the soul knows that unfinished emotions weigh heavily, and before it leaves it wants to clear the path. It wants to tie up the loose ends, not for perfection, but for peace. You may feel like they're suddenly reaching out more, or maybe they withdraw completely. Both are forms of preparation. Some souls want to say everything, others choose silence. But make no mistake, both are doing the work of letting go. And then, often without warning, something else happens. They start speaking about them. They might say, "They were here again last night," or "She stood by the window and smiled at me." You look around, no one's there, but they're not imagining it, because as the energy shifts, and the soul continues to loosen its ties to the body, the veil thins, and when the veil thins, the visitors arrive. Loved ones, guides, beings of light, they come not at the moment of death but before, sometimes weeks before. You'll hear the names, see the smiles, watch their eyes sparkle as they talk to someone just over your shoulder. You'll see their hands lift, as if reaching. You'll hear them say, "They're waiting for me." And they are. This is the soul's quiet preparation, the turning inward, the soft detachment, the remembering. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens gently, with grace. And if you're present for it, if you stay open, you'll begin to see death not as a sudden event, but as a sacred unfolding, a series of soft whispers before the final exhale, a symphony that starts playing long before the curtain falls. The month before someone leaves this world is holy ground. It's not just decline, it's not just the end, it's the beginning of the return. And in that return, the soul moves closer and closer to what it truly is. Not a body, not a name, not a story, but light, love, consciousness, eternal presence. So if someone you love is nearing that place, be still. Listen, feel, because something extraordinary is happening. The soul is preparing. And in that preparation you are being given a glimpse of the sacred, one soft breath at a time. It begins subtly. You might not even notice it at first. Maybe your loved one starts to mumble softly under their breath. Maybe they pause in the middle of a sentence and stare at something or someone just past your shoulder. Maybe they look into the corner of the room and smile. You ask who they're talking to and they respond with a name you don't recognize. Or maybe they whisper, "He's right there," or "She came back again last night." You look around, but the space is empty. At least, it appears to be. but something inside you knows they're not alone. You're witnessing something sacred, a conversation with the other side. In the days, sometimes weeks before passing, a veil begins to lift, and with that thinning comes a bridge, a connection between worlds. Your loved one's soul is beginning to drift between realms, no longer rooted only here and not yet fully there. It's a state of in-between, where time feels soft and the rules of physical reality start to bend. And it's in this liminal space that the reunions begin. These conversations don't always follow the logic of the waking world. Sometimes your loved one will nod and smile in response to a question no one else heard. Other times they'll speak aloud, as if picking up an old conversation with someone long gone. It might sound like a dream at first, soft words, half-finished thoughts, but if you listen closely, there's something unmistakably real in their voice. A warmth, a joy, a recognition. They're not hallucinating, they're remembering. You might sit at their bedside and watch as their face softens, their body relaxes, and their eyes light up in a way you haven't seen in years. They might reach out with trembling hands trying to touch something just beyond the air. Or they might rest in stillness, their lips moving silently, as if answering a question from someone standing just beside the bed. And in a way they are, because those who've passed, the mother who died too young, the father who never said goodbye, the sibling they missed for decades, they begin to arrive. Not as shadows, not as dreams, but as light, as presence, as love made visible to the soul that is ready to see them again. The conversations that unfold aren't meant for your ears, but you're not excluded. You're invited to witness, to hold space, to honor what's happening. To the dying, these reunions feel more real than the physical room around them. The hospital monitors, the family members at the foot of the bed, those things begin to blur. But the presence of those who've come back to greet them, that becomes clearer than ever. It's like the soul turns its attention away from the noise of this world and begins to tune fully into the frequency of the next. And that frequency is love. These conversations are often filled with laughter, gentle tears, a sense of peace. Sometimes they're emotional, the chance to say what was never said, to forgive, to heal, to be received fully and finally. Sometimes the dying whisper things like, "I missed you so much," or "You look the same," or "Are you taking me with you?" These are not fantasies, these are reunions, real, soul-to-soul reunions unfolding in the sacred space between breaths. There's something profoundly humbling about watching someone speak to a being you can't see, and yet feeling in your heart that it's real. You may not understand it fully, you may not recognize the names they say, but the energy in the room doesn't lie. It shifts, it softens, it glows. You may feel goosebumps rise on your arms for no reason. You may feel the temperature change. You may sense the presence of someone you've never met yet somehow recognize. That's the veil parting just enough for you to catch a glimpse, to feel the echo of what's happening beyond the physical. Your role isn't to interpret or interfere. Your role is to be present, to witness, to honor the sacred space your loved one is standing in, because they are standing in two worlds at once. It's important to understand that not all of these conversations are spoken aloud. Some happen internally, sensed, felt, received, but you'll still see the signs, a sudden sense of calm, a look of surprise or awe, a smile so pure it brings tears to your eyes. It's in these moments that the soul is reconnecting with the truth of what it's always known. We are never truly apart. Love transcends time. Connection never ends. Sometimes the dying will say something cryptic, something that doesn't make sense to you. "He told me not to worry," or "They said I'll know when it's time." Don't try to rationalize it. Don't assume it's confusion. Just listen. Because what they're receiving isn't meant to fit within our limited framework of logic. It's coming from a place of higher knowing, a place your loved one is beginning to return to. And sometimes the most beautiful part is this: they aren't afraid anymore. Once the conversations begin, once they see the faces of those who've come to meet them, something in them shifts. The fear fades, the resistance softens. They begin to trust the process, to trust the journey, because now they know they won't be alone. Now they know they're not stepping into darkness, but into reunion, into belonging, into home. Even if they can't explain it to you, even if they can't form the words, you'll see it in their eyes. They've been touched by something divine. And perhaps one of the most overlooked truths of this entire process is that you too are part of this moment. You're not just a bystander. You're part of the sacred web being woven between worlds. Your love, your presence, your witnessing, it all matters. It anchors them. It affirms that what they're experiencing is safe, supported, seen. So when you see them smile at the ceiling or nod toward someone you can't see, don't correct them. Don't try to pull them back into your version of reality. Instead, ask them gently, "Who's here?" Or "What did they say?" Invite them to share, even if their words are fragmented, even if it doesn't make sense. Because to them, it's as clear as day. It's real. It's meaningful. It's part of their crossing. And it's not something to fear. It's something to honor. Because these conversations with the other side, they are proof of what the soul has always known. That love cannot die. That connection continues. That there is life beyond this life. That we are, each of us, held, not only by those still here, but by those waiting patiently on the other side of the veil, ready to welcome us home. So sit quietly, listen closely, and allow yourself to be in the presence of something holy. You are witnessing a miracle, not the end of a life, but the return of a soul to everything it has ever loved. Here's a moment, quiet, fleeting, but unmistakably sacred, that happens in the final stages of life. You're sitting by their bedside. Maybe you've been there for hours, maybe for days. The rhythm of their breath has changed. Their body feels softer, quieter, like it's slowly stepping back from the world. And then it happens. They smile. Not at you, not at anyone in the room. They're looking past you, over your shoulder to the corner of the ceiling, or toward a space that appears to your eyes completely empty. But their expression tells a different story. Their face lights up. Their eyes widen with a sense of recognition. Their whole body relaxes as if a weight has been lifted. Sometimes they laugh, softly, like greeting an old friend. Other times they whisper a name you haven't heard in years, or one you don't recognize at all. They reach out, with a trembling hand, just beyond the veil. And in that instant you realize something profound. They are not smiling at empty space, they are being greeted. What your eyes can't see, their soul is now beginning to behold. A reunion is unfolding, not imagined, not wished for, but real. As real as the chair you're sitting in, as real as the love that's been shared over a lifetime. Because at the threshold between this world and the next, something beautiful happens. The veil that once separated the physical from the spiritual becomes thinner, and through it, those who've passed before step forward to welcome the one who is preparing to cross. Not with grand gestures or flashing lights, but with love, with presence, with familiarity that cuts through time and space. You might think it's the medications, that it's the mind fading, that these smiles are fragments of dreams or fading memories. But when you look closely, when you really feel what's happening in the room, you'll know better. There's a peace that comes over them, a recognition, a knowing. That kind of serenity doesn't come from confusion. It comes from being seen. Because they're not hallucinating, they're remembering. The soul doesn't forget what the mind has buried. It doesn't lose track of the love that shaped it. And in the moments before death it begins to see clearly again. The illusion of separation fades. The boundaries between here and there dissolve. And standing in the light, often quietly, respectfully, patiently, are the ones they've longed for. The grandmother who held them as a child, the brother who passed far too young, the best friend from high school who died suddenly, even souls they never met in this lifetime but have known in countless others. They are all there, smiling back. It's a homecoming, one that doesn't require words, one that's communicated soul to soul, heart to heart, and it's written all over their face. That smile, that impossible-to-fake radiant smile is the soul's way of saying, I remember, I'm safe, I'm ready. It doesn't matter what language they spoke in this life. It doesn't matter if they had beliefs about the afterlife or none at all. This moment doesn't require doctrine. It doesn't follow dogma. It doesn't care what religion they did or didn't subscribe to. This is deeper. This is universal. This is truth. Some people will smile at what looks like an empty wall. Others will look upward, as if seeing a light no one else can perceive. Some will extend their arms, tears streaming down their cheeks, and whisper something like, "You came," or "There you are." Some won't speak at all. But the softness in their eyes, the pure peace in their being tells you everything. They are being welcomed. And what's even more powerful is this: the ones who come are always the ones the soul most needs. They might not be who you expect. It might not be the family members you are closest to, or the ones you spoke of the most. Sometimes it's someone you never even knew was important, a teacher, a childhood neighbor, even a soul from a past life you've never remembered. But when your loved one sees them, they know instantly, because the soul recognizes love across lifetimes. There are stories, countless, sacred stories, of people reaching their final days and speaking of a visitor who sits in the corner every night, or of a man in white robes who smiles but says nothing, or of children playing by the window who come and go. These aren't dreams. They are glimpses into the truth we've forgotten, the truth that we are never alone when we leave. And that smile, that mysterious smile at empty space, is the soul's way of signaling to you, they're here. If you've ever seen it, you know it changes something inside you. You can't unsee it. You can't pretend it didn't feel real. There's something in the air when it happens, a sacred silence, a kind of stillness that wraps around the room like a blanket. Everything feels suspended, like the world has paused just long enough to witness something holy. And if you haven't seen it yet, if you're preparing to be with someone as they approach their final days, know this: you may. And when it happens, don't rush to correct it. Don't explain it away. Just sit quietly. Just breathe. Let them have this moment. You don't need to understand it. You just need to trust it. Because in that final stretch of life, when everything else falls away, what remains is love. And love never forgets. It never leaves. It always finds a way back to you, especially when you need it most. That's what the smile is. It's not delirium, it's reunion. It's the soul stepping out from the confines of the body, blinking into the light and recognizing a face it's missed for what feels like forever. And in that split second, before they speak, before they reach, before the body lets go, the soul says, "Yes, I remember you. I know where I'm going now." So if you're there, if you're lucky enough to witness this moment, cherish it, because what you're seeing isn't emptiness, it's everything. It's love showing up right on time. And the smile? It's not goodbye, that's hello. At some point in life, almost everyone fears death. Not just the idea of dying, but the unknown that follows. The not knowing where we go, what we become, if anything at all. It's a quiet fear that lives under the surface of most human experience, hidden in the rush of daily life, buried beneath distractions, disguised as ambition or anxiety or doubt. Even those who live full, conscious lives often carry some residue of uncertainty when they think of the end. But something remarkable happens in the final days, something that softens even the most hardened fear. something that no philosophy class or spiritual text could ever quite prepare you for. That fear, it begins to fade. It doesn't happen instantly. It's not like flipping a switch. It's more like the gradual lifting of fog, the slow warming of sunlight across a frozen field, a soft, internal thawing that begins not in the mind, but in the soul. And as the end draws near, this quiet transformation begins to take place. You can see it if you're paying attention. The person who once clung tightly to life, white-knuckled, terrified of what might come after, begins to exhale. You notice it first in the way their body relaxes, in the way their breath slows, in the shift of their voice, the way their tone becomes lighter. Their eyes no longer dart with worry. They start to linger, to rest, to hold. They may not say it out loud, but you feel it in the room, the grip of fear loosening its hold, because something is happening that no one else can see. The dying are beginning to remember who they are, and in that remembering, fear cannot survive. This shift doesn't come from denial. It's not the resignation of someone giving up. It's the peace of someone waking up. Because what many people don't realize is that the closer the soul moves to the edge of this life, the more it begins to feel the presence of what lies beyond. Not as an abstract idea, not as a concept, but as something real, something near. The presence of divine visitors. Sometimes they come quietly, gently, like a soft breeze moving through the room. Other times their arrival is undeniable. A sudden sense of warmth, a glow in the space, a lightness, as if invisible arms have embraced the room itself. You may not see them with your eyes, but their presence changes everything. And the person who once feared death begins to feel held. That's the key, held. Because much of our fear around dying comes from the illusion of being alone, the belief that we will be cast into some void, that will be swallowed by darkness or judged or lost. But when the divine visitors arrive, whether they are loved ones who have passed, angels, guides, or beings of light, something ancient and familiar begins to stir within the dying soul. A recognition, a quiet inner voice that says, "You are not alone. You have never been alone. You are seen, you are loved, and you are coming home." And with that knowing, fear cannot remain. Even those who have never believed in an afterlife, those who swore up and down that death was final, begin to soften. They stop asking the questions that used to haunt them, not because they've found answers, but because they no longer need them. Because the moment you feel the divine press of love at your side, you don't need explanations. You simply know. You know you're safe. You know you're remembered, and that's when the shift becomes undeniable. A man who spent his life afraid to speak of death may suddenly smile and say, "I'm not scared anymore." A woman who once cried every night at the thought of the end might whisper, "It's going to be okay." Sometimes they don't use words at all. They just look peaceful, radiant, like something invisible has wrapped itself around them and carried the burden they've held for so long. They begin to let go, not in fear, but in love. You'll often hear about people who pass in their sleep with a smile on their face, or those who, after days of restlessness, fall into deep calm. You might hear their loved ones say, "It's like something changed. They just weren't afraid anymore." That's not coincidence. That's the soul realigning with the truth of its origin. Because death, for the soul, is not unnatural. It's not an end, it's a return. The body may resist, the mind may fear, but the soul remembers. And when divine visitors arrive, they carry with them not only peace, but memory. The memory of what we are, where we came from, and where we're going next. And the closer the soul draws to them, the less power fear holds. There are moments near the end where people seem to straddle both worlds, one foot still in the physical, the other already stepping beyond. In this state they often speak of light, of warmth, of beauty so profound it brings tears to their eyes. They may describe seeing a field or a door, or a hand reaching toward them. And in every description you'll notice one common thread: love. not judgment, not punishment, not isolation, just love. And that's what melts the fear. That's what breaks the illusion. Not philosophical certainty or spiritual platitudes, but the felt presence of something so loving, so intimate, that every part of the soul begins to rest. Even those who lived in denial, even those who turned away from anything spiritual their entire life, in those final moments something shifts, not because they were convinced, but because they were met. The divine didn't wait for their belief, it simply showed up. Because love doesn't require permission to enter, it just is. And when it's felt, really felt, fear vanishes. So if you're sitting with someone who's dying, and you've seen the fear in their eyes, take heart. Know that there is a moment coming, perhaps quietly, perhaps unexpectedly, when that fear will begin to dissolve, when they will begin to feel the presence that has been with them all along, when the shadows will lift and the light will find its way in. You don't need to force that moment. You don't need to convince them of anything, just be there, love them, hold their hand, let the divine do the rest, because the soul knows its way. And when it sees the light, when it remembers the love it came from, fear doesn't stand a chance. It fades, quietly, softly, fully, leaving only peace in its place. There's a sacred misunderstanding that's followed humanity for generations. The idea that when you die, you go somewhere else. That everything you've known disappears. That death is a vanishing, a departure from everything familiar. But that belief, while deeply embedded in our culture and stories, misses the deeper truth. You don't just die, you remember. Because dying isn't an act of disappearance. It's not erasure. It's a return, a lifting of the veil, a rising back into the fullness of what you've always been, but perhaps forgot along the way. From the moment you were born, you were wrapped in the fabric of this world. You were given a name, a body, an identity. You were handed a story. Who you are, where you belong, what you should fear, what you should strive for. And slowly, over the years, that story became your reality. You forgot the vastness of your soul. You forgot what it meant to feel weightless, infinite, connected to all things. You became tangled in the illusion of separateness, and in doing so you forgot your origin. But the soul never forgets. It waits patiently, beneath the noise of the mind and the rushing of daily life, like a deep current flowing far below the surface. And when the body begins to release, when the breath slows, and the heartbeat softens, and the mind loosens its grip, the soul begins to rise, and with that rise, something beautiful begins to unfold. You begin to remember. Not in the way you remember a birthday or a childhood home, but in a much deeper way, a knowing that transcends words, a recognition that doesn't require proof. You begin to feel again what it's like to be whole, what it's like to exist without the burden of fear, of shame, of trying to be anything other than what you are. You remember the light. Not as something external, not as a belief, but as a reality, a living, breathing presence that welcomes you not with questions, not with judgment, but with open arms. You remember that you are that light, that you've always been, that the stories, the struggles, the roles you played were never who you truly were. They were costumes, beautiful, important, purposeful, but temporary. And when those begin to fall away, you feel it. The freedom, the weightlessness, the sense that you are not going somewhere unknown. You're going home. Home isn't a place in the clouds or a distant paradise. It's not an address in the afterlife. It's the feeling of being fully known, fully seen, fully loved, without condition, without performance, without separation. It's the eternal place within you that existed before your first breath and will remain long after your last. When you die, you don't step into darkness. You step into clarity. into warmth, into remembrance. And this is why so many people, as they near the end, begin to soften. They speak less about regrets and more about forgiveness, less about accomplishments and more about love. They no longer care who was right or wrong. They begin to let go of things they once held tightly, not because they've given up, but because they're waking up. It's not uncommon for people in their final hours to suddenly speak of seeing familiar places, even if their eyes are closed. They describe hearing music, feeling surrounded by light, being wrapped in peace. Some speak of walking through gardens, of flying, of floating, of being held. Others describe nothing at all, just a feeling so complete that they struggle to put it into words. They are remembering the state of being that existed before the noise of this world. And the most profound part, there's no fear in this remembrance, because it feels like coming home after a long, exhausting journey. The moment your soul recognizes its true nature, everything that once felt terrifying about death falls away. You begin to see that what you thought was the end is actually the beginning. Imagine this. A baby in the womb, warm, safe, floating in complete darkness. To that child, the womb is everything. It's all they know. And then, one day, they begin to feel pressure, contraction, movement. They don't understand what's happening. The world around them begins to push and shift, and they're thrust into something completely unknown. Birth. To the baby, it might feel like dying. But to everyone watching, it's the beginning of life. And so it is with death. From this side, it looks like leaving, letting go, fading. But from the other side, it is birth. It is emergence. It is the soul coming back into its fullness, its vastness, its eternal truth. This is why so many people report a kind of brightness at the moment of death, a tunnel of light, a pull towards something deeply loving. Some speak of being greeted by familiar faces. Others describe feeling merged with everything, the trees, the stars, the earth, the divine. These aren't dreams. They are echoes of the soul stepping beyond limitation. And you don't need to be religious or spiritual to experience it. You just have to be willing to let go. Because the truth is, your soul is not afraid of death. Your soul has done this before. It's danced through lifetimes, carried you through bodies, learned through joy and pain and silence, and it knows without a shadow of doubt that death is not the end. It is the doorway back to wholeness. That's why, in the end, there's often peace, even for those who resisted, even for those who denied everything spiritual. There comes a moment, a flash of recognition, a deep exhale, when the soul says, "Oh, I remember now." And just like that, the fear dissolves, the sadness lifts, and what's left is presence, stillness, love. So, when you think of death, don't think of it as a vanishing, think of it as a remembering. The moment when the curtain is pulled back, and you step out of the story you've been acting in, and remember that you were never the character, you were always the light behind the stage. And the place you're going? It's not a foreign land. It's home. They sit quietly, their bodies fragile but their spirits alert, watching, listening, almost waiting. You sit beside them, holding their hand, wondering what's going through their mind in those moments when they stare off into the distance, when they whisper to someone who isn't there, or when a strange peace settles over them like a soft blanket. You wonder what they see. You ask yourself, why won't they tell me? Here's the sacred truth most people never speak aloud. Many of those who are transitioning, who are on the very edge between this life and the next, don't tell you what they see because they're trying to protect you, not from the truth, but from your fear of it. They are holding a revelation so profound, so beautifully overwhelming that it escapes language, and even if they could speak it clearly, they hesitate, not out of selfishness, but out of deep love. You see, by the time someone is nearing death, they are no longer attached to the same ideas of communication that you and I are. They're not thinking in timelines. They're not trapped in the logic of words or burdened by the need to explain. They are floating between worlds, part here, part beyond, and in that liminal space, silence becomes sacred. Expression is no longer always verbal. It's energetic, telepathic, subtle. A smile, a look, a single tear. And when they do speak, it often sounds cryptic or strange. They might mention names you don't recognize, places they've never visited, or people you're certain have already passed away. Sometimes they speak of going home or getting ready. Sometimes they say they were just talking to a parent, a sibling, a child long gone. These aren't hallucinations. These aren't delusions. They are glimpses into what your loved one is already beginning to see. But here's the part you must understand, and it may break your heart a little. Many dying people choose not to share what they're witnessing because they don't want to frighten you or create discomfort in their final days. They sense your fear. They feel the tightness in the room when the subject of death comes up. They see the worry behind your smile and the desperation in your eyes, asking them to hold on a little longer. And so they go quiet, not because there's nothing to say, but because they don't want to make your grief heavier. You might think they've retreated, that they've drifted into themselves, but the truth is, they've expanded. They're seeing things now that language can't contain. They've touched the edge of the veil and peered beyond it, and what they've seen, it's not frightening. It's not empty. It's not dark. It's radiant, loving, and overwhelmingly peaceful. Some describe this transition like watching someone enter into a secret ceremony, one that you're not meant to join just yet. You're a witness, a guardian of their human form. But what's happening for them inside them, it's divine. The body may appear still, but the soul is in motion. It's preparing. It's remembering. In hospice rooms all over the world, caregivers and nurses will tell you the same thing, that many patients begin having vivid dreams or visions in their final days, that they see deceased loved ones standing by the bed, that they speak to people no one else can see, and often, when asked about these experiences, they'll simply smile, or wave it off, or whisper, "You wouldn't understand." It's not dismissive, it's protective. Because telling you they just saw their mother in the corner, even though she passed 10 years ago, might make you panic, might make you question their mental state, might make you sad, and they don't want to add sadness to your plate, so they hold it, quietly, with reverence. And if they do try to speak about what they're experiencing, but you react with fear or skepticism, or try to change the subject, they learn not to say anything more, not out of judgment, but because they love you, because they know you're not ready to hear what they're ready to embrace. What they're seeing, it's not a dream, it's a remembering. It's the beginning of reunion. They are being greeted, not by angels with trumpets or golden gates, but by love, by presence, by a warmth that doesn't belong to this world. They don't need to explain it, they feel it. They understand it in their bones, even as those bones begin to fade. And so their silence becomes holy. It becomes a bridge between two worlds, the unspoken prayer of a soul slipping back into eternity. But here's what's most important for you to know. Their silence doesn't mean you've been shut out. On the contrary, it means you are being held in a space of deep tenderness. They are inviting you, without words, to feel what they feel, to see not with your eyes but with your soul, to remember in your own way what they are remembering in theirs. The veil is thin, and in those final days they are not alone, and neither are you. They may not tell you what they see, but if you sit quietly, with your heart open, you just might feel it too. There's something sacred unfolding in the moments before someone passes that most people never speak of. Not because it isn't happening, but because it's invisible to the human eye. You might see the hospital room, the quiet hospice space, the family gathered close. You might notice the hushed whispers, the gentle hands wiping tears, the stillness that fills the air as the body begins to let go. But while everyone here prepares for goodbye, something extraordinary is happening somewhere else. Heaven is preparing too. We think of death as a singular event, a moment in time where one world ends and another begins. But in truth, it's a meeting point, a sacred convergence. Just as loved ones gather at the foot of a bed in this world, so too do loved ones gather in the unseen. They stand at the edge of the veil, waiting not with sadness, but with joy, not with sorrow, but with celebration, because for them it's not the end, it's the homecoming they've been waiting for. You may not see it, but they do. Those on the other side begin their preparation long before the final breath. It's not something rushed, it's not chaotic. It's timeless, intentional, filled with reverence. There's no panic in the spirit world, no fear, only love, expanding and opening like the petals of a divine flower, ready to receive one of its own back into the fold. It might be a grandmother who passed decades ago, still lovingly watching over the family. It might be a sibling gone too soon, who now returns as a guide. It might be ancestors you've never met in this lifetime, but whose blood runs through your veins. They are all there, lining up, reaching out, gathering. And it's not just people. Sometimes it's the presence of beloved pets. Sometimes it's the memory of a childhood home, rebuilt in shimmering light. Sometimes it's the unmistakable feeling of a place that once existed only in dreams, suddenly alive, vibrant, filled with colors and textures that feel more real than anything in this world. The dying often speak of this. Sometimes they whisper it, sometimes they simply smile. Sometimes their eyes fill with tears, not from fear or pain, but from the sheer beauty of what they're beginning to sense. The veil becomes thin, and through it they glimpse the gathering. They begin to feel the pull, not as something terrifying, but as something familiar. And what's astonishing is that this preparation isn't passive. On both sides, something is being coordinated. As you rearrange pillows, speak softly to your loved one, or hold their hand, there are preparations being made in parallel. It's a mirrored grace, a sacred choreography. You're not alone in your vigil. There is an entire spiritual welcome party moving into place. Imagine for a moment that there's a room just beyond this one. Not in another galaxy, not far away, but just one layer beyond what your senses can reach. And in that room, every soul who has ever loved you, known you, cared for you, even if only for a fleeting moment, is gathering. They're not silent, they're not stoic, they are joyful, they are laughing, hugging, crying tears of their own. They are remembering you in your fullness, not as the fragile body that lies in the bed, but as the radiant soul you've always been. They've been waiting, and now they're lighting the way. You might wonder how this can be, how the invisible world could possibly be organizing such a reunion while we sit here in quiet grief. But that's the miracle of it. The universe doesn't separate life from death the way we do. To the soul, it's all one flow, one unbroken stream of consciousness, and in that flow, timing is not measured by clocks, but by readiness, by love, by alignment. When someone is nearing their transition, their spirit begins to send signals, not just to the body, but to the unseen. It's like a light turning on in the fog, a beacon that says, "I'm coming home," and instantly the other side responds. You don't need to believe it, you only need to feel it, because if you've ever been present at the bedside of someone who's leaving, you've likely felt that sudden stillness, that shift in the air, that moment when everything feels suspended. That's the threshold. That's when both worlds pause, one releasing, the other receiving. And often, just before this moment, the dying will begin to speak in ways they never have. They might say things like, "They're almost ready," or "It's not time yet, but they're coming." Sometimes they'll speak to people you can't see, responding to voices in the room that no one else hears. Sometimes they'll say things like, "She looks just like I remember," or "He's smiling at me." These are not fragments of a fading mind. These are signs that the soul is already beginning to cross. Not fully, not yet, but enough to feel the welcome forming. The ones on the other side do not rush. They wait until everything is in place, until the final word is spoken, until the last hand is held, until the soul has fully said its goodbyes here and is ready to walk forward. And when that moment comes, they come closer. The light becomes stronger, their presence more real. Sometimes, in the very last moments, the one who is passing will lift their head slightly, as if looking at someone. Sometimes they smile, sometimes they weep, but not from sadness. These are tears of joy, of awe. They are seeing what we can't, and what they see is magnificent, because what they are walking into is not emptiness. It is the most vibrant welcome home. It is a chorus of love. It is a soul-deep exhale, and it's been prepared, with care, with intention, with divine precision. You may not hear the music, you may not see the light, but you're standing right next to it. When your loved one closes their eyes for the last time, it is not the end of their story. It is the moment the doors open wide, and on the other side of those doors are the ones who never stopped loving them, the ones who walked this path before, the ones who promised to return when the time was right, and now it is. So while you gather around the bed, whispering your final words, know this: you are not alone in your vigil. The other side has been preparing too, not just for a passing, but for a reunion, for a restoration, for a soul returning to its fullest light. And in that sacred exchange between two worlds, there is no such thing as goodbye, only homecoming. It doesn't happen all at once. The transition from life to death, from form to formlessness, is not some abrupt vanishing like flipping a switch or falling into a void. It's far more graceful than that. It's more like walking through a slowly opening door, one that you didn't even realize was there until the light started pouring through the cracks. And when that light touches you, something inside begins to stir. In the final moments of your life, everything slows down, not in a frightening way, but in a way that feels deliberate, even reverent. Time seems to stretch and soften, as if the universe itself is giving you space. Space to feel, space to surrender, space to begin the journey back home. And make no mistake, that's exactly what it is, a journey. Not into the unknown, but into remembrance, into the arms of something that has been calling you softly for your entire life, whether you knew it or not. Death is not a solitary leap, it is a guided path. And you, even in your most vulnerable state, are not alone on it. In those final breaths, your soul begins to uncouple from your physical form, gently, like a silk thread being pulled free from fabric. There's no tearing, no struggle, no violence. Your body may appear still, but something ancient and eternal within you is stirring, rising, beginning to lift. You start to feel lighter, not physically but energetically. The weight of the world, of your identity, of everything you once believed yourself to be, starts to fall away. The roles you played, the fears you carried, the pain you endured, they begin to dissolve, like mist in the morning sun. You don't need them anymore. They belonged to the life you're now completing. And in their place comes a strange and beautiful clarity. Not mental clarity, but soul clarity, a recognition that this moment, however final it may appear, is not an ending. It's a return. And then you feel them. The guides, the loved ones, the beings of light. They don't startle you. They don't rush in with fanfare. They arrive quietly, gracefully, like they've been there all along, just waiting for the moment you'd be able to sense them again. They are familiar, even if you can't recall their names. Some are people you've known in this lifetime, others go far beyond it. Soul family. Companions from lifetimes you can't consciously remember. Their presence feels like home. They don't speak with words. They communicate with feeling, with vibration, with thought. And what they offer you above all else is peace. There's no rush, no pressure, just an invitation. An invitation to remember where you came from. And still, even with this growing light and love around you, you may hesitate. That's part of the journey. Not because you're afraid of what's ahead, but because you might still feel attached to what you're leaving, to the people who love you, to the life you built, to the body that held your story. Letting go, even in the presence of such divine beauty, can feel bittersweet. But your guides understand this, and so they don't push. They hold you. They radiate the kind of unconditional love that gives you the courage to step forward, not away from life, but toward your own soul. And then something shifts. You begin to rise. Not like floating upward through the air, but more like being pulled by gravity in reverse. Not toward a destination, but toward your origin. It feels like a deep exhale after a lifetime of holding your breath, like slipping into warm water after being cold for so long. It's not dramatic. It's sacred, quiet, deep. As you move through this passage, you don't forget who you are, you remember, but in a fuller way. You remember your essence, unfiltered by pain or ego or conditioning. You remember the contracts you made before this life. You begin to understand why certain things happened, why certain people entered your story, why some left. The bigger picture becomes visible. Time begins to dissolve completely. You're no longer bound to linear memories. You're in a state where all things exist at once, the joys, the heartbreaks, the laughter, the lessons. But instead of being overwhelming, it's beautiful. You see how it all fits, how it all mattered, how even the hardest moments served your soul's evolution. And in this remembering, there is no judgment, not from others, not from yourself. You are met only with love. In fact, one of the first things souls often experience on this journey is a profound realization that they were always loved, that the universe never left them, that even in their darkest nights they were held, that nothing, no failure, no mistake, no regret, ever made them unworthy. This isn't something you read in a book or hear in a sermon. This is something you feel as you move further into the light. It wraps around you, it infuses you, it becomes you. And at some point, not marked by minutes, but by alignment, you cross, fully. And when you do, it's not with fear, it's with awe. Because the moment you let go completely, you are embraced completely. You don't fall, you rise, you merge, you become. The separation between you and the divine vanishes, not because you lose yourself, but because you finally remember that you are the divine, expressed through a human form, now returning to source. You're not alone on this path. Every step of it is guided, watched over. So, even if no one in the room can see it, there are beings beside you. Even if you feel like your last breath was taken alone, there were arms around you the entire time. Unseen, yes, but real. More real than anything this world ever showed you. The journey back home is not a fall into darkness, it's a rising into light, into wholeness, into truth. And it is the most natural, beautiful, soul-affirming journey you will ever take. You don't have to know how it will unfold. You don't need to have it all figured out. Because when the time comes, the path will appear. The guides will arrive, the light will surround you, and the home you thought you'd lost, the one your heart has been longing for, will open its doors, not as a place, but as a remembrance, a sacred return to the love that's been waiting for you all along. From the moment you take your first breath, something unseen begins walking with you, quietly, faithfully, without demand or condition, through every high and low, every shadowed hour and every burst of joy. It remains, watching, guiding, waiting. Most people never notice it, never speak of it. They live their lives feeling alone in their pain, separate in their struggles, isolated in their doubts. And yet, the truth is this: you were never alone, not for a single moment, and you never will be. not even in death. This truth, the one they don't teach in schools or whisper during grief, is the one your soul has always known, but your mind often forgot. No one ever dies alone. It doesn't matter what the room looks like, whether a dozen family members are gathered around your bed or whether your final breath is taken in solitude, you are not alone. You may not hear footsteps. You may not see the silhouettes. But when the moment comes, you are surrounded, not by strangers, not by shadows, but by love, by a presence so ancient, so familiar, that it cannot be described, only felt. In those final moments, something sacred happens. The world becomes quieter, the veil becomes thinner, and the soul, which has long carried the weight of fear and separation, begins to feel held, not physically, but spiritually, deeply. It's not the kind of holding that arms can offer. It's the kind that wraps around your entire being, whispering through the air. You are safe. You are seen. You are coming home. Even those who lived in isolation, those who felt misunderstood, unloved, or even rejected, when death arrives, they are greeted, because love doesn't keep score. The divine doesn't abandon. The ones who left before them, the grandparents, the friends, the children, the souls from lifetimes past, they return, not with judgment, not with questions, but with open arms. And it's not only those who loved you in this life. Sometimes it's souls you haven't remembered, but who've been part of your journey long before this body, this name, this face. Soul family, guides. Beings of light, who made an agreement to be there when the time came, to help you cross, gently and with honor. They don't wait until your final breath to arrive. They're already there. They arrive in the quiet moments when your breath begins to slow. They come in the final dreams, in the stillness before dawn, in the corner of the room where you sometimes feel warmth but can't explain why. They come when your soul starts to look past the walls of the room and sees something more, something vast, familiar, waiting. It's easy from this side of the veil to imagine death as lonely, especially when we see someone pass in a quiet room, or in the middle of the night when no one else was there to witness it. But what you see with your physical eyes is only half the story. The soul does not wait alone. It does not leave in silence. It is welcome, and it is not afraid, because in that moment of crossing there is no longer any space for fear, only peace. The soul, which once clung to the body like a child afraid to leave home, now feels the warmth of something it had forgotten, and in that warmth it lets go, not into darkness, but into embrace, the embrace of those who promised to return. It's not a dramatic scene. There are no flashing lights or thunderclaps, just presence. A presence so loving, so complete, that it fills every fiber of who you are. You don't question it. You don't resist it. You simply remember it. And the moment you remember, everything changes. The sadness lifts, the fear fades, and the illusion of separateness dissolves. You begin to understand that all those moments in life when you felt like no one heard you, you were still being listened to. All the times you cried in silence thinking no one cared, you were being held. That presence, the one that never left, was there. Quiet, constant, patient. You were never walking alone. And when you reach the end, when your soul is finally ready to cross that final threshold, that presence steps forward, fully, unmistakably, not to take you away but to bring you back, to yourself, to the truth, to the home you never really left. Because death, as final as it may seem, is not a vanishing, it's a return. And it's never done alone. In every hospice room, in every quiet passing, in every whispered goodbye, there are souls gathered. Sometimes it's a mother who passed when you were still young. Sometimes it's a best friend who never got to say goodbye. Sometimes it's a guide you never knew by name, but who's walked beside you for lifetimes. They come not out of duty, but out of love, because in the spirit world, Love keeps its promises. And those promises echo across lifetimes. They whisper, "I will find you again. I will walk you home." Even in the darkest moments of life, even when all hope feels lost, your soul is never forgotten. The divine does not overlook you. The universe does not abandon. And when the time comes, it responds, not with spectacle, but with presence, with light, with a love so deep it makes you wonder how you ever believed you were alone. This is what they never told you, that no one ever dies alone, that even if your body is still, your soul is being welcomed, that even if your breath has stopped, your light is rising, that even if no one on this side is holding your hand, 1,000 hands are reaching from the other. So when the day comes for you or someone you love, know this: the path is not empty, the crossing is not cold, it is sacred, and you will be seen, you will be guided, you will be loved, just as you always have been, even when you couldn't feel it, even when you forgot. You are never walking alone, and you never will.